Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad that y'all are here. My name is Brandy, and what I do is I do dark history on witches and native history and things like that. But today we're going to be talking about a witch, and this happened in the 1600s, so we're kind of going back a little bit. We're also going to be in England today. She was one of the first witches persecuted by a watcher. Yeah, a watcher. And so we're going to get into that, on what a watcher is and all that fun stuff. So, but if you are new here, I tell a different story about twice a week when I can. At the same time, I put some makeup on my face and we just chat about, or I just chat about the story. So I hope you guys enjoyed this story today. Just imagine being disabled, and that is what causes the majority of her issues. But that's not the only thing that happens. There's a lot in this story, and so let's go ahead and get this party started. So today, the lady that we are talking about is named Besse Clarke. She was born in 1565, okay? And all this stuff that ends up happening to her happens, like I say, a little bit later on in the 1600s. But during this time, it was during the Civil War where there was a separation of church and state. The Angelican Church was the church that King Charles I had backed up. But the Angelican Church was falling apart, thus the king was on the run, okay? And so we have this separation of church and state, and as we see in all these videos, there's always some kind of catastrophe that happens. And then this is why these witch trials come about. Well, the catastrophe in this is that people were leaning more towards being Puritans, Protestant Puritans, and they did not like Catholics. They didn't want anything to do with Catholics. So now the poor Catholics are being attacked again, of course. I mean, that religion has gone through so much after me reading all this stuff. I'm amazed that it's even still around today. And I love Catholicism anyway. But let me just go ahead and keep going. So, like I say, they were the church. They were separate from the state, and when that happens, people of power, they start thinking that it's like, oh yeah, we can just kind of take over the town and like do whatever we want, right? Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's what happens. They start taking over Essex because there is no, there's no state. There's just religion. And so these pious Protestants start preying on people by saying there's witches in the community. And of course there's one in particular that just has to stick his nose in. His name's Matthew Hopkins, and I know I've talked about him before because he is one of the ones that goes on to do so many witch trials and literally kill over 200 people for witchcraft, supposedly. Yeah, this guy's not a good guy. Now, the Puritans, they were not fun people. No. They wanted people to stop swearing and getting drunk and fornicating, which, okay. But what they did was they told people they could not wear fine clothes. They could not listen to music. There was certain art that they were not allowed to look at. Certain literatures that they were not allowed to read. To me, sounds like a lot of control there, okay? That sounds kind of more like a cult. I'm just going to spade, you know what I mean? It sounds like a cult. But this was the Protestant church at the time, okay? They wanted people to be very pious, and they wanted them to do like what the reverends, they wanted, of course, all the reverends and the preachers and stuff to be like the number one top dogs, And when we talk about Matthew Hopkins, you have to remember that his dad was a preacher, and so he came from that background. And it was kind of, I guess the fear of witchcraft was kind of instilled in him as well. They began to win the Civil War as a result of the Anglican Church crumbling. And like I say, the king is on the run. And so they started, they wanted a purer government than before. And so they started looking for witches, literally. Just started looking for witches. And that's where these watchers come in, okay? These watchers were people that would watch certain people, other people, that they thought were a witch. And they would watch them and wait for them to do or say or anything that would show that they were a witch. And then you would go to the witch finder person, which is Matthew Hopkins in our story. He is just a witch finder. He is not a demonologist. Let me just clear that up right now, because that's what the whole problem with this is. Some people study this as the demonology part because they want to be ministers and they want to be preachers and things like that back then. Because we have King James version of demonology out there, and that was one of the textbooks that we know demonologists used. So our homeboy Matt, not really our homeboy, but Matt decides he's going to read this, and he's going to rid his community of Manningtree, which is about 3 miles away from Essex. He decides he's going to rid their community of witches. So before we get too far into talking about Matthew Hopkins, we're going to talk about Bess really quick, because she has a few things that's wrong and they need to be pointed out, because these are the reasons why they end up taking her in, okay? First off, she was not very educated, okay? She had a sister named Jane, and she actually stayed with Jane and Jane's husband in her house, and I'll tell you why in just a second. She also had an illegitimate child, which she named Jane after her sister, and that's already a lot off the list, am I right? Like, that's a lot of notches on the list right there. She's poor, uneducated, but she also only has one leg, okay? And this is kind of a big deal, because to the Puritans, God would only do that to somebody that deserved it. I'm sorry, that makes no sense to me, but here we are, right? So they think that if something like that happens to you, because you're not just born without a leg, it was obviously taken for a reason. And the reason we don't know. We don't know the reason, unfortunately, but that's okay. Because it doesn't matter the reason. But when you're a woman, it does. A man can come home without a limb, and they'd be like, oh, he lost his limb in the war. It's totally fine, But a woman without a limb is unattractive, not wanting, definitely not husband-getting material, is basically what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so they thought that it was that her disability of having one leg was because of something she had done in a past life. Well, speaking of past life, their mother was Annie Sampson. Bess and Jane's mom was Annie Sampson, who was put to death years before that. So now we got old dude thinking they come from this long line of witches, right? Because their mom was a witch. Their mom got convicted of witchcraft. So now he's thinking that it's just kind of going down the line. You know what I mean? Like, what? Okay, so not only does she have one leg, guys, she also has marks, okay? She's not a very beautiful woman by their conventional standards, okay? They're thinking that she is, she has these marks on her body, like little moles and things like that. I mean, I have a mole right there. I guess that just goes ahead and just put me on trial. You feel me? I mean, that's about how much sense this makes, right? Not only does she have the marks and things on her body, she doesn't have the leg. Now, how did they get, I gotta tell you guys this part about how they got rid of, how they did amputations back in the day. Okay, so you see like a barber shop, right? With the little spinny thing outside. Well, yeah, you go to the barber shop and you get your hair done, you get your face shaved, but you also get your teeth pulled and you can get a limb cut off, okay? And how they would do it was This is before they had no pain medicine. I mean, I'm sure they had pain medicine, but they had no anesthetic. So you were lucky if the doctor sharpened his knife that day, because he'd have to use a knife first, okay? And the reason he had to use a knife first was because he had to cut around the tissue. So what he would do is he would have, okay, say this is the leg, and my ring is like the little clamp, you know, to make sure the person doesn't bleed out when they cut it. So they'll cut around this part with a knife through the skin and the tissue and all that until the bone's exposed. Then they'll be like, all right, dude, give me my saw. And then they get the saw, and then they have to saw through the bone and to amputate a leg. It's incredibly painful without any anesthesia. They're awake the entire time. I imagine some of them probably passed out from the pain, and that's probably a good thing. But that was how they got rid of, that's how they did limbs back then. It was like, you need a tooth pulled, go see the barber. You need one of your fingers cut off, you go see the barber. You know, you would think that would be a doctor type thing, but it was not. And so I had to put that out there for you guys too. So because she only had the one leg, she might have had a peg leg, or she might have needed crutches, but it was incredibly painful. She probably didn't, like I say, she didn't have a lot of money, so it's not like she could afford maybe, you know, she couldn't afford. She had to stay with her sister so that her sister would take care of her, because you have to imagine trying to get around taking care of your child, and you only have one leg, and so it's really, really tough. And so let's go ahead, and I'm going to tell you guys what happens with this woman and this witchcraft, because it's absolutely bonkers. Basically, these English witch trials, okay, showed that regular citizens, like having power or whatever, caused way more harm than good, okay? Because everybody started to point the fingers and stuff like that. Like Matthew Hopkins, okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit. I did tell you a little bit about him, but he was also a sick man. Yeah, he was sick, and we believe he was sick before he pointed the finger at Bess, but he's not even the first one that did it. Okay, so there was a man, and his name was John Rivet. He was leaving Essex and heading to Manningtree. Okay, Manningtree is like 3 miles away. Now, John's wife starts having fits in their carriage or whatever they're riding in. She starts having fits, and he's like, oh my God, he's like freaking out. He doesn't know what's going on. He's like, she's like shaking and she's having fits. And so he's like freaking out. He doesn't know what's happening, you know? And so what does he do? What does he do? This is like the pot calling the kettle black. Okay, what I'm fixing to tell you guys, all right? John Rivet decides he's going to go see a seer, a diviner, to find out what's wrong with his wife. Let that sit for a second. I'm just saying, okay? And so this diviner tells him that there are 2 witches that are bewitching his wife. So basically, a witch tells him that there are 2 witches bewitching his wife. Okay? Yeah, that's what I mean. Pot calling the kettle black. What? Alright. So John makes the first accusation because this seer says one lives above you and one lives below you. Well, his neighbor was Bess, okay? And so automatically he starts pointing the finger, makes a formal accusation against her. Yes, he does. And says that she is bewitching my wife. She's doing all these things. And because the seer person or whatnot said so. Okay. So keep that in mind. So John says his thing. He's like, hey, I'm naming Bess as a witch. So she gets taken in and she gets questioned. Okay. Well, automatically right off the bat, she's not going to be doing very well because she has one leg. She has evidently a lot of blemishes. She's not very educated. She doesn't have any money. She has an illegitimate child. You know, these are all things that are stacked up against her before she even walks in the door. Because these witch finders think that there are, you know, these certain number of people that they have to, you know, get to. And that's not true. So anyway, these witch finder people are thinking that, you know, she's the one that's doing this. And Matthew Hopkins all of a sudden decides to jump on this train of pointing fingers at Bess. Supposedly he had been suspecting Bess for a while, but he never said anything until John said something. And then he comes up, Matthew says, oh yeah, Bess and these other girls were holding meetings outside of my house. And they were keeping me awake, like, all night, for like the last 6 months. So, why didn't anybody be like, okay, bro, why didn't you say something 6 months ago? Why are you waiting until somebody else points a finger and then all of a sudden you decide you see all this? He also decided that he heard one of these women telling their animals to go to Bess's house, okay? And so this is going to set the tone for these women having familiars, okay? Now, familiars are basically animals that kind of do what you ask them to do. And so he thought that these witches had familiars because that's what he read in the demonology book, right? And so he takes her, puts Bess in jail, and this is so terrible what they do in jail, okay? Not only are they automatically assuming that she's a witch because her mom was a witch and because this other person said that she was. And then, of course, you know, Matthew says supposedly that he sees her doing, you know, he hears her doing meetings outside of his house in the middle of the night and all that stuff. But yeah, you didn't say anything until just now, you know? Okay, you didn't. And then he says, yeah, somebody said that, yeah, they're going to such and such and all this other stuff. And it just, it gets bonkers. It gets bonkers, but she ends up in jail. Okay, so let me tell you guys about the jail situation because it's so bad. So our girl gets put in jail, okay? And it's not just gonna be old regular jail, okay? First, when she gets there, they have women, thankfully, check her body for moles and for witches' marks or whatnot, you know. So if you were born with a birthmark or something back in the day, you better be hiding it. I mean, that's all I gotta say. And so they were finding the marks and all this other stuff. Well, they get her to her jail cell, and not only is she in jail, they will not allow her to sleep. Let me tell you. So England, during this time in England, torture was not an acceptable form of getting a confession out of somebody anymore. Even though we had the Witchcraft Act during this time, because that's what she gets charged under, we don't have torture. But where there's a will, there's a way. Am I right? And of course, the men come up with a way of not torturing her, but technically, we know it's torture because they will not let her sleep. Okay, and it gets worse. They wouldn't let her sleep in her jail cell, and she had to continuously walk consistently, like walk back and forth in her jail cell. This lady had one leg, and they made her stay awake, sleep deprivation. We all know what happens when people don't sleep for 3 days. They start seeing stuff, you know what I mean? Making her walk, whether she had a peg leg or crutches, was probably incredibly painful, especially if she had a peg leg or something. It was making her walk, and they did that for 3 days. Not only that, they had people watching her. Yes, they had people watching her 24/7. These watchers, right? What they were waiting for? They were waiting for the familiars to show up. Yeah, they were like, the familiars are gonna come. We're gonna see these familiars, you know, that everybody's talking about in these books that we're reading. We're gonna see these familiars, you know? And so they were like really, really excited about seeing it. Well, 3 days goes by. Nothing's really happening or anything like that. Until Matthew and one of his friends, John Stern, is not Rivet, but John Stern now, another John, they go and visit her in jail, hoping to ask some questions, find out some things. Because remember, Matthew is incredibly obsessed with this woman. He wants to know every single thing that she's done to be a witch. How did you become a witch? Why did you become a witch? What did you have to do? Like, these are the things that he wanted to know. He was so hell-bent on thinking that she was a witch that he wasn't going to let it go. And she realizes this after 3 days of no sleep and walking, pacing back and forth in her jail cell consistently with people watching to make sure that she does it. Okay, so Matthew comes to visit her. And she says, please, come in, and I will tell you what you need to know. Which is basically her seeing them and saying, please come in and have a seat so that I can sit my ass down too, because I'm freaking tired. So Matthew and John Stern go down to her jail cell, and they start chit-chatting. And she's like, I'm going to tell you everything that you want to know. Not a problem. And so he gets ready and he sits down and, he's ready to hear this story. Well, she starts first talking about blood pacts with the devil. She was saying that the marks on her were from the devil or whatnot. I need more of this. And yeah, the marks were from the devil. And so he wanted to know any and all the things about everything, okay? And so she starts to talk about her familiars. So 2 guys pull up a chair and they're like, all right, let's chat. So first thing she says to them is, hey, guess what? I have been having sex with the devil, or relations, I guess I should say, with the devil for 7 years. And he comes over like 3 or 4 times a week. And y'all gonna die. And then, I'm sorry for laughing, and then she said that he was a proper gentleman, okay? This devil that used to come and see her was a proper gentleman, which meant to Matt that this was like a mid-level, high-class devil, right? Because he had like he wore like a lace collar, so he was really a high-class devil, is what Yeah, I know you're laughing. I know you are, because it's hilarious. And go ahead and laugh, because it is funny. So he's thinking, oh, so this ain't no low class. This ain't no low class devil. This is a high class devil that's coming to see her, okay? Anyway, so the devil, comes and sees her, and they make a blood pact and all this stuff. But she turns the narrative because she's very smart. She says that he came to her and basically seduced her into doing sin and things like that, okay? And so while she's telling this story, she says, I will call to one of my familiars, all right? Cool beans. Guys, they sit back and they're waiting, they're like, all right. She's like, make some kind of sound like that, And then, so they're waiting and they're waiting. And then all of a sudden, this little dog appears. It's a little white and tan dog. It's a little short guy, little short legs. And he appears to the jail cell. And that thing's name, it ended up having a name. It was like Jamaica or something like that. Anyway, and so all of a sudden, Matt is like looking at this dog, which Matt says it was a dog. John Stern said it was a white cat named Holt. But Matt was saying, oh my God, the devil is in this puppy. The devil is here. He actually showed up. And he is in the form of a puppy. I mean, I'm sorry, but I think puppies are cute. I really don't think that a devil is going to come in the form of like a yipping, licking puppy. You feel me? I feel like she made friends with this dog because she'd been in jail for 3 days. I mean, I really do. And then she called it and it came. So, I mean, what's the big deal with that? Now, after they see the dog or cat, I believe that after that, then the rest of the familiars that she names are ones that she could only see, supposedly, is what she was saying. Because, like, a greyhound would come to her, she said, and it would change into a child. And its name was Vinegar Tom. Yeah. She also had a black demonic rabbit named Sack and Sugar. Okay. Sack and Sugar was actually the name of a popular drink at the tavern there at the time. And so you could tell she's just coming up with stuff off the top of her head. But anyway, she had this black rabbit, supposedly. They never saw it. She just told them about it, I mean, they never saw anything. I mean, they might have saw the dog, yes, but that's so easily explainable away. But they really thought that the devil had come, and he had come in the form of a puppy. Okay, so she also said that her familiars would hang out with other witches, and so here's where she starts pointing fingers. Okay, and I don't know why she did. I don't know if she was just trying to get herself out of it completely. But after admitting all that stuff of having familiars, having these bites on you and stuff like that, saying the devil came to you and you made a blood pact with him, that's, I think they're going to keep you in jail for a little while, But she ends up accusing Ann West and Ann Leach. There were two widows, okay? And Elizabeth Goodwin as well, which she was just Elizabeth Goodwin. So she implements these, or she says these three women were doing stuff with her, like they were having Sabbaths, having meetings, and all this other kind of stuff. And so they needed evidence, like, of all this. They were saying that, okay, now remember this, because I believe that there's been clout chasers since the beginning of time, and this chick I'm about to tell you about, she is a clout chaser. Okay, and this is Ann's daughter, Ann West's daughter, Rebecca. Okay, she had already started talking to the police about witchcraft on March 21st. That's the same day that Bess got arrested. Okay, yeah, coincidence? I don't know. So anyway, she's interrogated. Rebecca is interrogated again on April 28th, and she just begins to confess that she had sex with the devil in the shape of a proper man. You notice she's kind of taking on Bess's story a little bit. And he promised her revenge on her enemies, and also killed her neighbor's son, supposedly, and also made the woman have a miscarriage. This is what Rebecca says that she did, asked the devil to do. Like, murder, really? Like, why couldn't you ask him to, like, mow the lawn or something, or make it rain, or sunshine? I don't know. Anything else but that. So they needed evidence. And Rebecca was like, I got evidence for you. He told me that he can do what God does too. Now this scared everybody. This freaked out everybody. It's like, oh my gosh, he can do what God does? Like, oh my God, this is not good. So Rebecca said she knew Satan's abilities because her and her mom, Ann West and Ann Leach, and Elizabeth Goodwin and Helen Clarke, which is Ann's daughter, we don't know if she was related to Bess or not, but they had all met at Bess's house in Manningtree, okay? And so by doing this, she's confirming that there's been Sabbaths happening, and things like that. She said that they prayed with their familiars, that they were they had propositions with their familiars. Like Bess said that she wanted a horse accident to happen to Richard Edwards. Now, Richard Edwards was brother-in-law to Matthew Hopkins. Now, this family had rebuilt a church, a Puritan church, okay, early on before these witchcraft things happened. And they had rebuilt it so that these Puritans, these fundamentalist Puritans, could come in and have their experimentations and stuff like that. And this is where a man named Thomas had preached for a long time. And he wouldn't even wear the regular garb because they said it was too close to being Catholic. They were trying to steer far, far away from Catholicism. And so I wanted to tell you that they, this guy Thomas and Bess even went to the church. But this wasn't enough, evidently. Thomas ends up leaving. He goes to London because he gets another preaching job. And so that's when the town's left on their own devices, and then all this shit happens. Okay. Anne Leach, okay, she's questioned on April 14th. And she confessed that she was working with Bess and Elizabeth to kill Richard Edwards' son. Okay. So evidently, we got Bess wanting to get Richard Edwards. This Richard Edwards, he must have been a jackass or something. I'm not very sure. But Rebecca, others wanted his livestock to be killed. Okay, which is kind of odd. Isn't that right? Wanted his livestock to be killed. Rebecca wanted Prudence Hart to miscarry, like I said earlier. Now, Anne Leach, like I say, she was questioned as well. She confessed working with Bess and them to kill Richard Edwards' son, like I said. And she had also killed Robert and Jane Kirk's daughter, Elizabeth. She said that she did that. Yeah, she said that she killed their daughter. Now, their daughter could have died from a sickness. There's a lot of sicknesses and stuff back then, and a lot of diseases. And it's easy to say, oh, witch pointed her finger and she got sick, but no, Anne, no. And so she was also suspected of killing the Parsley's girl around March 1st, which is just before the questioning of all the witches began. And so you can imagine these two parents, the one that lost their daughter, they become watchers, and because they're mad, they're angry, they're upset, and I totally understand why. Because they think that all these witches that are saying stuff are coming out and doing things to their children and to their livestock and into their livelihood. And so they're pissed about it. Now, on April 11th, we have Helen Clarke, who's going to be talked to, and she was questioned. She said she had nothing to do with, this little girl dying. And the only thing that she had basically asked for, she promised by the devil that if she worshiped him, then she would want for nothing. So basically, she just wanted to not have to want for things. She wasn't asking for anything terrible or anything like that. She just wanted an easier life, I'm guessing. So hers wasn't too bad, So all the accused are sent to prison. Yes, they are, every single one of them. And old dude, Matthew, he keeps going through the town and he keeps finding more and more people, y'all. I'm telling you. He's finding folks everywhere. He wanted to follow up with Helen to find out more about the meetings with Bess, at Bess's house. And so Rebecca told him that they had a conversation about how she got into witchcraft, how she became a witch. And so the guys were like, oh, she's going to tell us how she became a witch? This is going to be awesome, right? So she said it happened a year before that 5 women met at Bess's house with their familiars. If one familiar asked her mom, Ann West, if her daughter knew the business. Does she know what's going on here? Does she know what the gets is, what the story is here? And so Anne pulled out a book and made Rebecca swear she saw nothing. You did not come to this meeting. You need to swear in this book. I don't know if she had to write it in blood or whatever. But then the devil appeared and then kissed Rebecca, and later said she married the devil and saw him as her God. I'm telling you, this Rebecca chick is I'm going to start calling clout chasers Rebeccas from here on out, because this chick is the #1 clout chaser of all time. I don't know if there's something mentally wrong with her in saying all these things, or she's just trying to get attention, which I feel like that's what it is. She's just trying to get attention. But give me a break, for fuck's sake. Now it's time for the trial, you guys. Oh yes, trial time. So all of the ladies and everything that are in jail, they end up going, you know, to court. And in this court, there's no judge. It's an earl, okay? This man had he had no business being a judge because he had no idea how to be a judge, but he was of this trial, okay? And there were two juries. There was a petty jury and a grand jury. Now this totaled up to be like 36 dudes against these women, right? These women were not allowed to have representation. No, they were not. The only thing that was allowed was people could come up and tell stories about them, and then that would be evidence. Yes, basically. And so because the Earl had title and money and he had been in the military and all this before, they were like, okay, so he can be the judge and it'll be fine, you know? Okay. So he's the judge. The Earl starts by asking the grand jury, start looking through the evidence, and I want you to find something to indict Miss Besse with, you know? And so basically everyone came up to the state and their evidence again and stated their evidence against Besse, okay? And so they found her, they indicted her on 2 charges under the Witchcraft Act of 1604. And they approved 2 indictments. She was feeding familiars and killing John Edwards, son of Richard and Susan Edwards, in 1644. So I'm guessing John Edwards did die, and now they're trying to blame his death on her. Make it make sense to me, y'all. I just can't even take it. So anyway, 18 women were tried. Besse, of course, was found guilty. A majority of these people were found guilty. Helen Clarke was charged with killing Anne Parsley, the little girl. Margaret Moon was also said to have helped with the murder of John Edwards. Like she had evidently supposedly helped Besse with the murder of John Edwards, this Moon lady. And there was one acquittal. Her name was Joan Powell. I can't read my own handwriting. Was immediately acquitted, and she was a widow. We don't know much about her or what she said or anything like that, but she was the only one that was acquitted in this one trial. 36 were imprisoned, 29 were sentenced to death. 4 of these women died while they were in jail, okay? They died while they're in jail because the conditions were so freaking bad. So July 18th comes around, and this is when all the women are led to the gallows, okay? They are led there, and one of these ladies, Margaret Moon, she actually dies in line waiting at the gallows because she probably had a stroke or a heart attack because she was so scared. Imagine seeing people before you going, okay? But the worst part was Besse. So they get to Besse to hang her, right? Besse can't climb the ladder. You know, she only has one leg. Now these guys that do these executions and kind of gauge how high to drop somebody from their body weight. It's almost like a science, okay? I'm just saying. I don't know much about it, but it's like a science. So they were looking at her, knowing she can't climb up the ladder, and she's missing the leg. So they're having to figure out how high to drop her in order for her to die. And they're having to help her up the ladder because she can't get up the ladder herself at all. She only has one leg. So imagine the executioner guy is just like, oh man, I gotta help this chick like up the ladder and then pull it up higher, and you know, so it was very uncomfortable, basically, is what I'm trying to say. The fact that they were trying to put this woman to death like that. She couldn't reach the stairs or anything. I mean, she couldn't climb the stairs. She couldn't. It was a big deal. So, but it ended up happening, and you know, they had to help her up the ladder and all that other kind of stuff, which is totally fine. But The sad part about this is the only reason why she was put to death was because they thought that she was a witch because she only had one leg, so she was disabled. Being disabled made you a target. Having a child out of wedlock made you a target. Having marks on your body made you a target. All these things made people targets because of this book that King James wrote, Demonology. That's where Matt Hopkins was getting all of his information from. So after they do their damage, Matt Hopkins and John Stern do all their damage in Manningtree. They decide to go to 7 countries and start having witch trials everywhere. Okay, yeah, until one day they get to a court where a judge starts reading out questions to Matthew, basically asking, hey bro, we have some accusations here saying that you're a witch. And I mean, they're not wrong, you know? He didn't go to college for demonology, so he was not a demonologist. They thought he was just literally obsessed with witches. Point blank, period. Okay? Matthew actually, they end up doing, they find out that Matthew is paying people or asking people for money, 20 shillings. I'll get rid of the witches for you guys. 20 shillings, not a problem. I can do it for you. So not only was he charging people for something that wasn't even happening, and then having that fear mongering, you know what I mean? They ended up killing between 200 to 400 across these 7 countries. Okay. Now, and it wasn't too much long later that Matthew writes The Discovery of Witches. And in this, y'all, he names himself the General, okay? Like the General of Witch Findings. And like what does he call himself? The Witch Finder General, you know? And the Discoverer. Because discover was to discover other witches. I don't know where it's, you know, I mean, it is what it is. So anyway, people read this book and they were like, this guy is so narcissistic. Like, how are you going to sit there and name yourself? You're the General of witch finding. Like, you are not even a legit certified demonologist at all. And yet you're sitting here going around and you're killing hundreds of people, women and men in these countries. And it wasn't too much later that he did pass away, because like I say, he was sick. He was probably sick before he even named Bess. But the aftermath of when people found out that he was asking people for money, and that they had no actual evidence for these women whatsoever, but yet they were condemning them to death. Okay, so once Matthew dies, John Stern is like, oh crap, I think I might be getting sued, you know? Like, this is not a good thing. This is not good. And I don't know what to do. And so he kind of just disappears off the map. And you know, because after a while, people start asking questions. They're like, how is it these 2 guys can just go around and say anybody's a witch, and then people just jump up and say it's okay? Some people started coming to and were like asking questions. They wanted to know, what is the deal? You know, why are you going around to different countries and pointing out women that you think are either marked up or disabled or poor, or maybe they couldn't pay the 20 shillings and you're a witch, you know? It's so after a while it died down, luckily, but we are left with Bess's story. She was the first to be hung by a watcher, and it's very, very sad the reason why they did it. To think in your religion that somebody having a disability is a way of God punishing you is demented. That is insane. I would never, ever in my life think that. And just because Bess had an illegitimate child, we don't know. Maybe she was forced. It could have been, a situation, an SA situation. It might not have been something that she asked for. But she had her baby, and she had that baby baptized, and she did everything right. She went to the new church. But because Matthew had a complex, I almost feel like this Matthew guy was probably really short. I envision him as like having short man syndrome. And it's real with women too. They're a little bit spicier, a little bit crazier than tall people. I don't know why that is. It's just like, I feel like Matt was asserting his dominance because even though he had so much status and money and came from a rich parish that his dad was a reverend of, he still didn't feel like it was enough. Nothing was ever enough for him until he went absolutely bonkers and just started killing people just because they either had a disability or checked a check mark off of a list that he had. And so that is the story of Besse Clarke for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm not gonna lie, this is the third time I've tried to film this, and I'm hoping this works. So anyways, I will see you guys on Thursday. Hopefully I'll have another story up then. I know I'm a day late today. I apologize for that. Yesterday just was not a good day. Not going well for trying to film, and cameras dying and running out of storage, and then my editing tools went away and it just got bonkers. So let's hope this works. Anyway, nobody's told you guys today I love you, okay? And I hope that you have a wonderful week. So much love.